Have you ever faced a moment that shattered your entire world? Imagine discovering his secret family the night before the wedding, the ultimate betrayal no one sees coming. This story isn't just about heartbreak, it's about finding strength when everything falls apart. Listen closely, because through Emma's journey, you'll learn how to rise from the darkest truths. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire and empower you every step of the way. Emma always believed love would find her when she least expected it. She wasn't the type to chase fairy tales, but somewhere deep inside, she still hoped for that one person who would make her feel seen. And then came Daniel. He walked into her life like something out of a quiet Sunday dream, gentle voice, thoughtful eyes, and a way of making her feel like the only woman in the room. From their very first date, there was something magnetic between them. Not fireworks, not chaos, but calm. The kind of calm that feels like home. When he held her hand, it wasn't electric, it was grounding. She had never known peace could feel that romantic. They started small, long coffee dates, walks through farmers markets, playlists shared over dinner. But the way he listened, really listened, to her, made her believe in soulmates again. He remembered the little things, how she took her tea, what book made her cry at 16, that she liked her toast slightly burnt. In a world full of distractions, Daniel paid attention. And for a woman like Emma, who had been overlooked before, that mattered. It wasn't just his attention that won her, it was his consistency. He showed up. Again and again. And she started to believe, maybe destiny really does pick favorites. Vacations came next. Spontaneous road trips, lake houses in autumn, wine tastings where they laughed too loud. She'd look at him from across the table and think, this is it. This is what I was waiting for. They took goofy pictures, got sunburned together, danced barefoot in kitchens. Every moment felt unedited. He made her feel safe to be soft, safe to be silly. That's what makes love dangerous sometimes, not the intensity, but the comfort. Because when it feels this real, you stop doubting. You stop questioning if it's too good to be true. And Emma? She had stopped a long time ago. The proposal didn't need flash. It was quiet, just the two of them, after a dinner he cooked himself. He knelt, ring in hand, eyes trembling, and asked her to build forever with him. She said yes through tears. Not because it was unexpected, but because she'd been ready for so long. For Emma, that moment wasn't about the ring. It was about everything that came before it, every late-night talk, every promise kept, every moment he chose her. That's what real commitment looks like, right? Choosing someone even when it's not convenient. And she was sure he'd always choose her. She dove into wedding planning with her whole heart. Mood boards, fittings, cake tastings, the works. Every detail mattered, not because she wanted the perfect event, but because she wanted to honor the love they had. Her friends teased her for how serious she was about napkin colors and seating charts. But to Emma, this was more than a party. It was a milestone. Proof that sometimes, people do get their happy endings. The dress, the venue, the flowers, it all felt like the prologue to something sacred. Her childhood self would have been proud. She had waited for the right person. And she believed she had found him. Daniel kept showing up in all the right ways, supportive, involved, genuinely excited. He called her his miracle in front of his parents. And they adored her. So did her own family, who hadn't seen her this joyful in years. There's a rare kind of magic when two families blend effortlessly, when friends become shared, and laughter feels doubled. Emma often caught herself smiling for no reason at all. She even started writing a journal titled Becoming Mrs. Cole, just to hold on to the beauty of these moments. The entries were full of gratitude, hope, certainty. She truly believed her dream wedding would be the beginning of a dream life. But here's the thing about stories that feel too perfect: sometimes, perfection is the disguise. Emma didn't notice the cracks, not because they weren't there, but because she wasn't looking. She didn't need to. Trust had become her default setting with Daniel. And when someone makes you feel that safe, you don't double-check the foundation. You build. You invest. You lean in. It never occurred to her that a man could wear loyalty like a mask. That underneath all the warmth, there might be cold corners he never let her see. Emma wasn't naive. She was in love. And sometimes, that's exactly what blinds you. People often ask how someone missed the signs. But love, real love, softens your edges. It makes you want to believe. You explain things away, dismiss gut feelings, because questioning feels like betrayal. Emma had been hurt before. That's why when she finally found someone who seemed to love her right, she held on tightly. Maybe too tightly. She didn't snoop. She didn't doubt. She didn't investigate. Because when someone shows you their best version long enough, you start to believe that's all there is. And Emma? She believed in Daniel with every beat of her heart. Until the very night before the wedding. That night, the stars felt a little quieter. The air, heavier. And though she couldn't explain why, Emma felt a subtle knot in her chest. Like a whisper she couldn't quite hear. But she brushed it off, blaming nerves, stress, maybe even the wine. Because tomorrow was supposed to be the best day of her life. A new chapter. A shared last name. A home filled with their future children's laughter. What could possibly go wrong when everything felt so right? What she didn't know was that love stories like this one sometimes take a turn. And the next twist was already on its way. The morning sun poured through the windows like a blessing. Emma stood in her kitchen, barefoot, humming a tune she couldn't name, sipping coffee from her future Mrs. Cole mug. It felt surreal. In just a few days, she'd walked down the aisle toward the man she had prayed for on lonely nights. The apartment was cluttered with ribbons, fabric swatches, and notes scribbled in haste, but to her, it all looked like love. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from bridesmaids, vendors, and her mom asking, "Do you need anything?" Emma didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt ready. Like all the pieces were finally falling into place. She had chosen a lace dress that wrapped her like poetry, delicate, timeless, just dramatic enough. The boutique owner cried when she tried it on. Emma did too. Because in that moment, she didn't just see a bride, she saw a future. The dress wasn't about impressing guests or photo shoots. It was about walking toward a life she believed in. She imagined Daniel seeing her in it for the first time, his hand going to his mouth, speechless. That thought carried her through every stressful moment. Through late nights addressing envelopes and navigating family expectations. Through everything. Because this was the life she had always imagined. Their vows were handwritten. She wanted them to be raw and real, not Pinterest perfect. Emma spent nights rewriting them, trying to put her feelings into words that could match their story. "You are my only one," Daniel had said the week before, pulling her close during a slow dance in their living room. No music, just the rhythm of two people who believed they'd never lose each other. Those words became her anchor. She'd repeat them to herself in quiet moments, when she felt anxious, when she needed reassurance. And every time, it reminded her that love, real love, doesn't need to be loud. Just honest. Friends called their relationship a dream. "You two give me hope," someone wrote on Instagram beneath a photo of them holding hands at sunset. They didn't even try to look perfect, they just were. There were no screaming fights, no silent treatments. Just easy love, the kind people envy but rarely see. Their families got along like they had known each other for years. Her dad took Daniel golfing. His mom helped Emma choose floral arrangements. It felt like the universe had finally gotten something right. Like all her past heartbreaks were just paving the way for this. For him. For them. The wedding venue sat on a hilltop, surrounded by wildflowers and tall trees that whispered in the breeze. Emma had chosen it months ago, on instinct. She remembered standing there, imagining the chairs filled with the people who mattered most, the aisle covered in rose petals, the soft strumming of an acoustic guitar. Every visit after that only confirmed her choice. She had found the place where her forever would begin. And in that space, she allowed herself to dream bigger, of anniversaries, babies, growing old and rocking chairs on a porch. She didn't see a ceremony. She saw a promise. There was something sacred about watching a vision come to life. The calligraphed invitations, the scent of lavender in the centerpieces, the blush bridesmaids' dresses, all of it was her heart laid bare in color and texture. Daniel loved every detail she showed him, or at least pretended to. "You have great taste, Em," he'd say, with that signature half-smile. He seemed proud to be part of her vision. Never critical. Never absent. He made her feel seen. Like her joy was his joy. That kind of alignment is rare, and Emma didn't take it for granted. She had never felt so celebrated for simply being herself. Of course, not everything went smoothly. The band cancelled once, the cake design got mixed up, her maid of honor caught the flu. But none of it shook her. It's strange how small problems feel when your heart is full. Every little obstacle only made her more certain, this was meant to be. She told herself that good things take effort. That true love deserves preparation. People always say, if it's right, it'll be easy. But Emma didn't believe that. She believed in showing up. In staying when it's messy. And Daniel. He had stayed. Over and over. That was all the confirmation she needed. There's a quiet kind of vulnerability that comes with preparing to say, I do. It's not about fear of commitment. It's about trusting someone with the softest parts of you. Emma was opening her life, her future, her name to another person, and she was doing it willingly. It's a sacred kind of surrender. Letting go of me to build a we. And as the days ticked closer, she wasn't nervous. She was certain. Because when a man looks you in the eye and tells you, you are my only one, there's no room left for doubt. There's only room for forever. But certainty, no matter how strong, isn't always safe. Emma didn't know that yet. She was too busy practicing her vows in front of the mirror, imagining their first dance, daydreaming about honeymoon mornings. She couldn't have known that somewhere beneath all that beauty, something dark was breathing quietly. That while she was planning a wedding, someone else was watching from the outside, waiting for the right moment to speak. The day she had waited for her whole life was almost here, but so was a truth she never saw coming. It was the night before the wedding. Everything was ready, the dress steamed, the vows printed, the perfume bottle unopened on her vanity. Emma sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through messages from friends wishing her luck, love, and lifetime happiness. She smiled softly, overwhelmed in the best way possible. Tomorrow, she'd marry the man she called her best friend. But as she reached to plug in her phone for the night, a notification popped up. A message from an unknown number. Short. Direct. And terrifying, asked Daniel about Maria and the kids. Her heart dropped, but her mind raced to keep up. Who would send something like that, tonight of all nights? A prank? Jealousy? Spam? She clicked on the profile. No name. No photo. Just the words. And the silence afterward. The kind of silence that feels too loud in a quiet room. Emma reread the message 3 times, her fingers trembling slightly. The word kids echoed in her chest. It didn't make sense. Daniel never talked about kids, not past ones, not future ones. And Maria? That name didn't belong anywhere in their story. At least, not the one she knew. She closed her eyes, trying to breathe through the sudden weight pressing on her ribs. It had to be a mistake. Or maybe one of those pre-wedding jokes people thought were funny. Her rational side begged her to ignore it. But something in her gut lingered. It wasn't just the message. It was the way it made her feel, like she had just stepped into a room she wasn't supposed to see. That message didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a warning. A quiet whisper from the universe saying, "Look again." Emma had never been the suspicious type. In fact, she prided herself on trusting people, especially Daniel. He had always been open, always patient. But now, tiny memories began to resurface. That one phone call he took on the balcony, his vague answers when she asked about his past, the weekend he said he had to visit a sick relative, but wouldn't say who. She had brushed it off back then. Love teaches you to give people the benefit of the doubt. But doubt, once it starts growing, has a way of eating through the strongest beliefs. She stared at her phone, debating. Should she call him? Ask him directly? Or pretend it never happened and enjoy the wedding she'd spent months dreaming about? The truth is, Emma didn't want to ruin anything. But she also couldn't silence the question now living in her chest. Who was Maria? And what kids? Every possibility felt like a trap. If it was nothing, she'd look paranoid. But if it was something, ignoring it would make her feel foolish forever. The closer she got to answers, the further she felt from the man she was about to marry. That night, the room no longer felt like hers. The decorations, the veil, the carefully placed shoes by the door, they looked unfamiliar. Like props on a stage. And she, the actress, was forgetting her lines. This wasn't how she imagined spending her last night as a single woman. She thought she'd be laughing with her bridesmaids, eating cake samples, or dancing to cheesy 90s songs. But instead, she was holding her breath. Staring into a device that had suddenly turned into a door, one she wasn't sure she wanted to open. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Everything felt so alive out there. Cars passing, people talking, the rhythm of life moving on, unaware of her internal storm. It's strange how one sentence can split your life into before and after. That text didn't just plant a seed of doubt. It carved out a space for fear to live. Because the deeper Emma thought about it, the more she realized something chilling. If someone was willing to send that message, they must have a reason. People don't make up kids out of spite. She sat back down, clutching her phone like it held the truth itself. She read the message again. And again. Ask Daniel about Maria and the kids. Not a question. A command. It didn't ask her to believe, just to ask. Emma wasn't sure if she wanted answers anymore. Because once you open a door like that, you don't always get to close it. Still, pretending nothing happened wasn't an option anymore. That one sentence had already shifted something inside her. Trust, once cracked, never sounds the same again. And so, sometime past midnight, with her hair still pinned for tomorrow's rehearsal, Emma did something she never thought she'd do. She dialed his number, hands cold, voice steady. She didn't plan what to say. She just knew she couldn't sleep without knowing. But deep down, some part of her was already bracing for what might come. She didn't want to believe it. She needed to believe it wasn't real. But the truth has a funny way of arriving, right when you're finally brave enough to ask the question. The ringtone felt longer than usual. Each second stretched like chewing gum, sticky, slow, full of tension. Emma sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone pressed against her ear, listening for a voice she used to crave. When Daniel finally picked up, his tone was calm, casual, maybe too casual. "Hey babe, what's up? Everything okay?" She hesitated. Her throat felt dry, but her mind was racing. She wanted to ask nicely, but the words came out sharper than she intended. "Who's Maria?" There was a pause. Not long, but just enough to freeze her spine. Daniel laughed, the kind of laugh that tries to sound light, but feels forced. "What? Oh. Maria. That's just my crazy ex. She still messages people sometimes. Probably trying to mess with us." He said it like it was no big deal, like it was just another minor inconvenience in their perfect life. But Emma heard something in his voice she hadn't heard before: hesitation. Not fear. Not guilt. Just calculation. As if he was choosing his words instead of just telling the truth. And for the first time, she didn't know if she believed him. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. She told herself to let it go, to believe the man she was marrying in less than 24 hours. That's what love is, right? Trust. Forgiveness. Giving people the benefit of the doubt. But something felt off. It wasn't just the story, it was how smooth it was. Too smooth. Emma remembered a conversation they'd had months ago, when she asked about his past relationships. He'd mentioned a woman who was clingy, but never gave a name. Had that been Maria? Or had he just avoided the truth altogether? Daniel kept talking. "She's probably jealous. You know how people get when they see someone else happy." That sentence hit her wrong. It wasn't about them anymore, it was about appearances. About what others thought. And suddenly, Emma realized something painful. Daniel was more focused on the story around them than the story between them. That's when fear crept in. Not fear of Maria. But fear that the man she was marrying might be hiding more than just an ex-girlfriend. Fear that her instincts had been right all along. She asked, "Are there kids involved?" Her voice barely came out. Like the words were too heavy to carry. There was a longer pause this time. Too long. Then came the answer, "No. Of course not. She's just saying that to mess with you. She's done this before." But there was something flat in his voice now. Like he'd shifted into autopilot. Emma didn't recognize that version of him. The Daniel she loved was warm, present, real. This Daniel sounded like someone reading a script, one he'd used more than once. Emma hung up a few minutes later, not knowing if she'd gotten answers or just better lies. She sat in silence, the room suddenly colder than before. Her mind flipped through memories like a photo album she couldn't close. Was he lying back then too? Had he ever truly been honest with her? The worst part wasn't even the possibility that he had a secret family. The worst part was how quickly he'd explained it away. As if it didn't deserve real conversation. As if her peace of mind wasn't worth more than a shrug. She wanted to scream. But instead, she just stared at the wall, trying to convince herself this was just stress. Pre-wedding nerves. Everyone gets them, right? Maybe she was reading too much into it. Maybe Maria was just some bitter woman who couldn't move on. But no matter how much she tried to reason with herself, that tiny voice in her gut kept whispering, "He's not telling you everything." And the hardest thing in the world is knowing something's wrong but not having proof strong enough to walk away. It's easy to tell yourself you're overthinking. That love means forgiveness. That no one is perfect. But there's a fine line between grace and denial. Emma wasn't sure which side she was standing on. Her hands were still shaking. Her heart felt distant, like it didn't belong in her chest anymore. She wanted to believe him. But the truth is, once suspicion enters a relationship, it's hard to kick it out. It camps in your mind. It changes the way you see things. And suddenly, the love that once felt like certainty now felt like a question. She didn't sleep that night. Just lay there, eyes open, replaying every word he said. Every pause. Every tone. She wanted the next morning to come and wash this feeling away. But deep down, she knew this wasn't something a good night's sleep could fix. Something had cracked. And even if the light hadn't poured through yet, the fracture was there. Waiting. Growing. What she didn't know was that the answer she feared most wasn't far. And sometimes, the truth doesn't knock, it walks right in when you least expect it. The apartment was still. The kind of stillness that feels unnatural, like the air itself is holding its breath. Emma sat in the living room, phone in hand, staring at the dim glow of the screen. After the call with Daniel, she had promised herself she'd let it go. But her mind wouldn't stop spinning. What if he was lying? What if there was more? She wasn't the type to snoop, never had been. But when a person you trust gives you half-truths, you start looking for the rest. Not out of revenge. Out of self-protection. His laptop sat open on the kitchen table. Not locked. Not closed. Like a door left ajar. Emma walked over slowly, her bare feet silent against the floor. She didn't feel like herself. She felt like someone watching herself from outside her body, a version of her she never wanted to become. But curiosity had stopped being curiosity. It had become survival. The browser was clean, nothing suspicious. But his email. Still logged in. She clicked. And in seconds, her world began to blur. The first thing she saw was a photo attachment, a subject line that read, "Last Sunday with the boys." Her heart dropped before she even opened it. The preview showed a picnic blanket, a woman, 2 children, and Daniel, holding one of the boys on his shoulders. The timestamp was just 8 weeks ago. A wave of heat flushed through her body, followed by cold. This wasn't old news. This wasn't a crazy ex. This was current. Real. Undeniable. She clicked through the rest, trying not to cry, but tears blurred her vision anyway. There were more emails. Conversations. Sentences like, "They miss you," and "Are you coming this weekend?" Emma didn't just feel betrayed, she felt erased. Like there had been another version of Daniel living a parallel life. One he never intended to share. He had brought her flowers, held her hand, talked about their future, while these messages sat unread, hidden in plain sight. And she hadn't noticed. Not once. The man she thought she knew was a shadow, layered and rehearsed. And suddenly, all the pieces began to fall in the wrong direction. She sat back, breathless, like someone had punched the wind out of her. The silence in the room wasn't peaceful anymore, it was screaming. All she could see were the faces of those boys. They looked just like him. And Maria, she wasn't some unstable woman from the past. She was real. She had been in the picture this whole time. Emma wanted to hate her. But she couldn't. Because the emails weren't angry or manipulative. They were soft. Familiar. Like a woman talking to the man she still considered family. Emma's eyes landed on one line, "I didn't tell them you're getting married. I didn't want to confuse them." That sentence crushed her. It meant Maria knew. It meant she'd been silent, maybe out of dignity, maybe out of resignation. And Daniel? He'd built 2 lives on borrowed time. One with bedtime stories and school drop-offs. Another with wedding vows and flower arrangements. Emma realized that she hadn't just been lied to. She had been replaced. Or worse, never fully chosen to begin with. She tried to stand but her knees buckled slightly. Her body didn't know how to hold this much grief. Because that's what it was, grief. Not over a breakup. But over the death of a future she had believed in. over a man who had looked her in the eye and made promises while erasing truths. She walked to the bathroom, splashed water on her face, stared at the reflection in the mirror. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not the way she used to. This version of her was unraveling. People talk about heartbreak like it's poetic. But in reality, it's silent. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in email threads, in hidden photos, in gut feelings that turn out to be right. It shows up in the realization that you never really knew the person you trusted most. Emma didn't cry loudly. She just sat on the bathroom floor, knees to chest, staring at the closed door. Because once you open a door like this, you can't pretend it's not there. You either walk through it, or turn around and lie to yourself. And lying to herself. That was something Emma could no longer do. She couldn't unsee the pictures. Couldn't unread the emails. Couldn't unknow what she knew. But as her phone buzzed with a new message from Daniel, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, love," a new feeling crept in. Clarity. Not peace. Not yet. But clarity. Because now she understood, this wasn't about finding more proof. The truth had already arrived. The only question now was, what would she do with it? The next morning, Emma didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She didn't cry either. She moved on instinct, driven by something deeper than anger, the need for truth. She had found a number in one of the emails. Maria. The woman in the photos. The woman who knew her fiancé better than she did. With shaky fingers, Emma sent a message, "Can we talk?" Woman to woman. She expected silence. Maybe even hostility. What she got was a quiet yes. "I think we should." They met in a small cafe just outside the city. No makeup. No small talk. Just two women sitting across from each other, each holding a different version of the same man. Maria looked tired, not bitter, not mean, just worn. She didn't need to ask Emma who she was. She already knew. And before Emma could even begin, Maria sighed and said, "So he's marrying you now." That sentence alone made Emma's stomach twist. It wasn't a question. It was resignation. Maria pulled out her phone and showed more pictures, birthdays, holidays, school events. The kind of life built slowly over time. A life Emma never knew existed. "He's the father of my boys," she said softly. "And I don't think he ever really stopped being my husband." Emma couldn't breathe. Not because Maria was attacking her, but because she wasn't. She was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes after years of disappointment. "He tells me he works late," Maria continued. "But I know that's when he's with you." Emma's heart cracked in a way she hadn't felt before. She had been so focused on her pain, she forgot there might be someone else bleeding too. Maria wasn't some villain. She was just another woman who believed in Daniel's promises. And now, both of them were left with pieces. "He lies to survive," Maria said. "But it's us who pay the price." The words stung because they were true. Emma realized she wasn't special, she was just the next chapter in a recycled story. "I thought maybe he'd changed," Maria confessed, her voice almost a whisper. "When he started seeing you, I thought it was a phase. Then I saw your engagement post. And I knew he had rewritten his life and erased us from the page." Emma wanted to disappear. She had posted that picture with pride. With love. And now she understood the silence from Maria wasn't weakness, it was dignity. A choice to avoid drama, even when her entire world was being stolen behind her back. Emma finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "Why didn't you warn me?" Maria gave a sad smile. "Because I thought, maybe if you made him happy, he'd finally stop lying. I wanted to believe that someone could fix him, even if it wasn't me. That sentence shattered something inside Emma. The illusion that love was enough. That she was enough. And the cruel irony was that both of them had loved a man who didn't know how to love honestly in return. There was no screaming. No chaos. Just a deep, aching silence between them. Like two strangers grieving the same funeral. Emma realized that Maria hadn't come to prove anything. She had already lost. And now, so had Emma. They weren't rivals. They were reflections, both deceived, both exhausted, both still searching for the version of Daniel they thought they knew. But he didn't exist. He never had. And the pain wasn't just in the lies. It was in the time they could never get back. They left the cafe without hugs, without closure. Some betrayals don't offer neat endings. Emma walked out into the sunlight, but the day felt darker than the night before. Her engagement ring felt heavier now, like it was mocking her. The world outside kept spinning, people laughed, cars moved, music played, but inside her, everything had stopped. She knew she had to make a choice. Not about Daniel, but about herself. What kind of woman would she be after this? And just like that, the heartbreak shifted. Not into forgiveness. Not yet. But into clarity. Emma had looked into the eyes of the other woman and found something she wasn't expecting: truth. And once you see the truth, it demands action. The kind that changes your life forever. Because the only thing more painful than discovering a lie is staying quiet once you know it. But what comes next? Well, that's when everything really begins to fall apart. The hotel room was supposed to be her sanctuary, a quiet place to rest before the biggest day of her life. But tonight, it felt like a cage. Emma stood in front of the mirror, her wedding dress hanging like a ghost behind her. She touched the fabric softly, the lace cool against her fingertips, but the beauty of it all mocked her pain. The weight of betrayal pressed down so hard, she could barely breathe. Her mind replayed every secret, every lie, like a broken record she couldn't stop. And suddenly, the perfect dream shattered. Tears streamed down her face, uninvited and unstoppable. She sank onto the bed, clutching the dress like a lifeline she wanted to tear apart. How could the man she loved, the man she trusted, have built a secret life under her nose? The betrayal wasn't just about the lies. It was about every moment she'd given him, every hope she'd held on to. The dreams of a forever crumbled in her hands, replaced by an unbearable emptiness. She screamed into the pillow, but the silence swallowed her cries whole. She paced the room, her heart pounding like thunder in her chest. The noise outside the hotel, the chatter, the laughter, it felt distant, like a world she no longer belonged to. The reality was raw and cruel. She was a bride without a groom. A woman in a dress meant for a wedding that was now just a painful memory. She felt like she was drowning in her own skin, suffocating under the weight of shattered trust. Every breath was a battle between holding on and letting go. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the veil, the symbol of hope and commitment she no longer believed in. With a desperate strength, she yanked it off, tears mingling with sweat on her face. The room seemed to close in around her, the walls whispering reminders of what she was losing. In that moment, Emma wasn't just a bride, she was a woman unraveling. The pain wasn't silent anymore. It was loud. It was raw. It was the sound of a heart breaking into pieces. She collapsed onto the floor, her body shaking with sobs. The dress, once a promise of happiness, was now a cage she wanted to escape. She thought about all the plans, the flowers, the music, the vows, and how they felt meaningless now. The future she had imagined was gone, replaced by a darkness so deep it threatened to swallow her whole. Yet, in that collapse, something fragile stirred, the first flicker of strength born from pain. The realization that sometimes, falling apart is the only way to start healing. The night dragged on, endless and merciless. Emma lay curled on the floor, the dress tangled around her like a shroud. Her thoughts spiraled, memories clashing with the harsh truth. The man she was supposed to marry had betrayed not only her, but the very idea of love she had cherished. But beneath the despair, a quiet voice whispered, not to give up, not yet. Because sometimes the darkest nights precede the brightest dawns. And in that darkness, Emma was about to find a strength she never knew she had. Her phone buzzed softly on the table, a cruel reminder of the world outside her broken bubble. She didn't answer. She didn't want to hear the lies or excuses. Tonight was hers, to mourn, to rage, to lose herself completely. The future could wait. For now, the only thing that mattered was surviving the night. And in that survival, there was a seed planted, a seed that would one day grow into something unbreakable. But for now, Emma was just a woman broken, with dreams scattered like ashes. The silence wrapped around her like a blanket, heavy and suffocating. She closed her eyes, wishing she could rewind time, wish away the secrets, the lies. But wishes weren't enough. They never were. Emma knew this night would mark a before and after. A point where innocence died and resilience was born. The woman who fell apart on that hotel floor was not the woman who would rise tomorrow. Because sometimes, the hardest battles are fought inside, and sometimes, those battles change everything. As dawn began to peek through the curtains, Emma's sobs slowed, her breathing steadied. The dress lay in ruins around her, but inside, a small spark flickered. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something simpler. A promise to herself that she wouldn't be broken forever. That even in the ruins of a shattered dream, a new story could begin. But for now, the night held her tightly, a broken heart, a collapsing world, and a woman on the edge of forever. The first light of dawn barely filtered through the hotel curtains as Emma made her decision. There was no room for doubt anymore. She wasn't just confronting Daniel, she was confronting every lie, every stolen moment, every shattered promise. With trembling hands, she gathered the evidence, photos, emails, the message that started it all. The weight of truth felt heavy, but it steadied her. This wasn't about anger. It was about reclaiming her power before walking into a room full of strangers and pretending everything was fine. She found Daniel waiting in the lobby, dressed in calm, as if nothing had changed overnight. But Emma saw the cracks. The hesitation. The fear behind his confident mask. When she stepped forward, her voice was quiet but firm. "We need to talk. Now." The guests began arriving, their laughter echoing through the halls, unaware of the storm about to break. Daniel's eyes widened, searching hers for some sign of mercy. But Emma had none to give, not this time. In the empty hotel corridor, away from prying eyes, Emma laid out the truth. She showed him the photos, the emails, the lies. Daniel's face shifted, from denial to desperation, then to tears. "I love you," he pleaded. "I wanted to tell you, but I needed time." But the time he needed was the time he stole from her. The trust he broke wasn't something words could fix. Emma listened, not because she believed him, but because she needed to hear it all, to finally release the pain bottled up inside. He begged for forgiveness, for another chance, for understanding. But Emma's heart had hardened. "You're not the man I thought I loved," she said softly. "You hid your life from me. You betrayed everything we built." Her voice cracked, but she stood tall. In that moment, she was no longer a victim but a woman reclaiming her story. And with tears in her eyes, she told him to leave, out of her life, out of the wedding, out of her future. No more lies. As Daniel walked away, shoulders heavy and eyes downcast, Emma felt a strange mix of sorrow and relief. The guests began to gather, curious whispers filling the air as they noticed the absence of the groom. Emma turned to face them, her voice steady as she explained everything: the betrayal, the secret family, the broken promises. The silence that followed was thick with shock and sympathy. She wasn't just canceling a wedding, she was unveiling a truth no one saw coming. The room that was supposed to be filled with joy was now heavy with reality. Emma felt exposed, but also strangely free. She had chosen honesty over comfort, pain over silence. Watching the guests leave, the decorations untouched, the flowers wilting, she knew this was more than just an ending. It was a new beginning, messy, painful, but real. And in that raw moment, Emma found a flicker of strength she didn't know she had. She caught a glimpse of herself in a mirror, a bride without a wedding, a woman stripped of illusions but not of dignity. Her heart still ached, but her spirit was awakening. The man she loved had fallen away, but she was standing. Not as a broken woman, but as one ready to rewrite her story on her own terms. The dawn wasn't just a new day, it was a turning point, a declaration that she wouldn't settle for less than she deserved. The whispers continued outside as Emma walked away from the scene, each step lighter than the last. She didn't look back. The past was behind her, the future uncertain but full of possibility. The pain was real, but so was the promise of healing. Sometimes, the hardest choices are the ones that save us. And Emma's choice to confront, to stand up, to say no more, that was her first step toward freedom. And just like that, the wedding that was supposed to last forever ended before it even began. But Emma's story, that was just getting started. The question now wasn't if she would love again, but how she would love herself, fiercely and without compromise. And that's a journey worth watching. The grand ballroom was silent, except for the soft echo of footsteps and the faint rustle of empty chairs. What should have been the happiest day of Emma's life had transformed into a haunting void. The guests, once filled with excitement, were now drifting away, whispers of confusion and sympathy trailing behind them. The decorations, meticulously chosen and lovingly arranged, stood as bittersweet reminders of a celebration that would never take place. The floral centerpieces drooped, their fragrance fading, much like Emma's shattered dreams. Emma stood near the entrance, her wedding dress still pristine but heavy with meaning. She watched her parents' faces, a mix of heartbreak and pride, as they tried to hold her steady. The crowd's eyes shifted between her and the empty aisle where Daniel should have stood. She spoke with quiet honesty, her voice steady despite the flood of emotions beneath. She told them everything, the secrets, the lies, the hidden family. No sugarcoating, no excuses. Just raw, painful truth that pierced the silence. Her words hung in the air, difficult to swallow but impossible to ignore. Friends and family, shocked yet supportive, began to understand the depth of her betrayal. The event that was supposed to unite two families became a shared moment of loss and revelation. Emma felt exposed, but there was an undeniable power in speaking her truth. The pain was real, but so was her courage. Watching the guests slowly leave, she realized that sometimes the end of one story makes space for a stronger, more honest one. The wedding dress felt less like a symbol of love and more like a weight around her shoulders. She gently placed it on a nearby chair, a silent farewell to the life she had imagined. Emma's heart ached, but she knew that clinging to illusions would only trap her in pain. The empty room mirrored the emptiness she felt inside, yet also whispered of possibilities yet to come. It was the morning of a dream, but also the first step toward healing. Her parents embraced her, their tears blending with hers. Their presence reminded Emma that she was not alone in this journey. Though the day had ended in heartbreak, it was also a testament to resilience and truth. Sometimes, love isn't about holding on, it's about knowing when to let go. And Emma was learning that lesson the hardest way possible. The guests' footsteps faded into the distance, leaving her with silence, but also with clarity. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Emma stepped out, breathing in the cool air. The world kept turning, indifferent yet beautiful. She felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The wedding was cancelled, but her life wasn't. This moment of loss was also a beginning. She had faced the worst and come through it. The broken pieces of her heart would take time to heal, but they would heal. And one day, she would be whole again. She thought about the promises Daniel never kept, the lies he told to hide the truth. But she also thought about herself, the woman who found strength in the darkest hour. The woman who refused to be defined by betrayal. Emma knew that the story wasn't over. The pain was part of the past now, but the future was hers to write. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. A hope that one day, she would find a love as real and honest as she deserved. That night, Emma didn't fall asleep immediately. Instead, she stared at the ceiling, letting the silence settle around her. The echoes of the day replayed, but they no longer felt like chains. They were lessons, reminders of what she would never accept again. And as the stars appeared, she made a quiet promise to herself, to heal, to grow, and to never lose sight of her worth. The wedding never happened, but Emma's life was far from over. And so, the chapter closed on a wedding that was meant to be forever, but instead became a story of heartbreak and truth. But every ending is a new beginning in disguise. Emma's journey was just beginning, a journey toward healing, self-love, and freedom. And that story, unlike the wedding, was hers to write, on her own terms. Months had passed since the wedding that never happened, but Emma's life was no longer defined by that night. She had moved to a new city, one filled with unfamiliar streets and fresh starts. New routines replaced the old memories, and the weight of betrayal began to lift, slowly but surely. She found a job that challenged her, surrounded herself with friends who lifted her up, and started rediscovering the woman she had almost lost. It wasn't easy, but each small step was a victory. Healing isn't a straight line. Emma learned that firsthand. Some days felt lighter, filled with hope. Others were heavy, where loneliness crept back in like a shadow. But she refused to let the pain define her. She started reading books about self-love and resilience, like Rising Strong by Brené Brown and You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero, finding comfort and strength in their pages. She journaled, took long walks, and slowly rewired her mind to believe in better days ahead. The freedom Emma discovered wasn't about running from the past but embracing the present. She stopped chasing a man who wasn't meant for her and began chasing her own dreams. She started cooking classes, picked up painting again, and reconnected with passions that had been buried under heartbreak. Each new experience was a reminder, she was more than a broken heart. She was a soul capable of great love, for herself first, and maybe, one day, for someone else. Self-love became her anchor. It wasn't selfish, as she once feared. It was necessary. Emma learned to set boundaries, to say no when something didn't feel right, and to listen to her intuition. She stopped apologizing for her worth and started demanding respect in every area of her life. The freedom she felt was intoxicating, a sharp contrast to the chains of lies she'd endured. Emma wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. Sometimes, when the nights were quiet, she still thought about Daniel. Not with anger, but with clarity. She forgave herself for loving someone who didn't deserve it and promised to never settle for less than honesty again. Emma's story wasn't about perfect love or fairy tales. It was about real life, messy, painful, and beautiful in its resilience. She knew the scars would remain, but they were reminders of her strength, not her weakness. Emma's friends noticed the change, how she stood taller, laughed louder, and carried herself with a new kind of grace. She became a source of inspiration, sharing her story not for pity, but to show that heartbreak can be a catalyst for growth. She encouraged others to walk away from toxic love, to heal without shame, and to believe in second chances, especially the one you give yourself. That kind of courage was contagious. Freedom didn't mean Emma was looking for a new love story right away. She was in no rush. For the first time, she understood that being alone wasn't loneliness. It was a sacred space for healing and rediscovery. She cherished her independence, traveled to places she'd only dreamed of, and embraced the unpredictability of life. The end of her story with Daniel was not a failure, it was a necessary chapter that led her here. Emma's journey was far from over. But now, it was hers to control. She knew heartbreak would visit again, that's part of life. But she was ready. Stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. The woman who once stood in a ruined wedding dress was now a symbol of resilience and hope. And that was the kind of love story worth living. And so, from the ashes of a broken heart, Emma rose, free, whole, and fiercely in love with the woman she had become. The night before the wedding may have destroyed a dream, but it gave birth to a new beginning.